A. Smith Show starts right now.
What a time. All trading blows. That's happening in men's tennis. Has it ever happened in any other sport throughout history? Has it ever happened at this level? It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, SiriusXM Channel 80, and on ESPN News. Will Cain in for Stephen A. Again today, the show is presented by Progressive Insurance, and all guests like you are on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. You can give us a call, 888-729-3776. Coming up on today's show, there's a growing sentiment, it appears, across this land that the Dallas Cowboys should not pay Dak Prescott, that his salary ask is getting into knee-knocking territory, scary, roster-compromising territory for the Dallas Cowboys. But it's wrong. The Cowboys should absolutely pay Dak Prescott, and I'll tell you why. But it's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. I'm serious. Give me the sport, give me the decade, and tell me an example of when we've seen the three best to ever do it go at it. To be a sports fan today is to watch some of the best of all time perform at the highest levels in their sport. Think about what we get to watch on any given night. We get to see Tom Brady play quarterback. In Olympic years of the last decade, we watched Michael Phelps, the greatest swimmer to ever do it, take to the lanes. Usain Bolt, fastest man alive. Serena Williams, greatest women's tennis player of all time. Tiger Woods, by many's estimation, the greatest golfer of all time. There are even out there people ready to argue LeBron James against Michael Jordan, so you get to, in some of your estimations, but not mine, say you got to see the best basketball player of all time. Analytics, nerds tell you Mike Trout's the greatest baseball player of all time. If you dig down into the numbers, you're watching the greatest do it. But in men's tennis, we might be watching something that we can say has never happened, which is not just the best and not just the second best, but the three best to ever do it go head to head. Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic squared off in the finals of Wimbledon yesterday in an over 6-hour match, the first in history to go to a tiebreaker at 12 games apiece. And Novak Djokovic beat Roger Federer in that Wimbledon final, taking his Grand Slam total up to 16. He trails Rafael Nadal, who has 18, who trails Roger Federer, who has 20. It's the three highest totals, 20, 18, and 16, of any player to ever play the game. These three are the three best to ever do it. Whoever else you want to put into the conversation comes in a distant fourth. Pete Sampras with 14 Grand Slams. What I'm telling you is we're watching something unprecedented. And Bobby Carpenter was on Get Up this morning, our ESPN football analyst, and he tried to search throughout history to come up with another example of where this has ever happened. Listen.
I'm trying to figure out in my mind, is there anything been like this in other sports? Have you ever seen three guys who at the end of their careers could all arguably be the greatest player of all time in that sport? I guess you could go back and look at maybe Gary Player, Arnold Palmer, and Jack Nicklaus, but they was pulled so far away that it really wasn't a deal at the end. But it was absolutely compelling to watch him go at it. Roger Federer had opportunities, and the Joker just finished him off.
At the time, Bobby gives a good example. Gary Player, Arnold Palmer, and Jack Nicklaus. But now you can't have that discussion because it's clear that Tiger Woods is one of the greatest golfers, if not the greatest golfer of all time. Messi and Ronaldo are the two greatest soccer players of all time, but you have to stop at a duo. You can't find a third member who is trading punches here, haymakers, back and forth like Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. You can't find it. best I can look, in the 1980s, you had Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, Thomas the Hitman Hearns, and Marvin Hagler. There was 4. And in their weight class, they're certainly all 4 in the top 50 greatest boxers of all time. That's according to ESPN's ranking. But the greatest of all time, you got to talk about Ali. And in the 70s, you did have Ali, Joe Frazier, and George Foreman. That was one hell of a battle between those 3. But are we talking about the 3 greatest of all time? Ali won that. Ali is clearly the greatest of all time. Again, you go back in golf history, you can start finding times when you had 2 guys trading it back and forth, like Bobby Jones and Walter Hagen, Ben Hogan and Sam Snead. I don't know that you can ever find an example where you've had 3 of the best to ever do it. Not in football. What? Brady and Manning in the mid-2000s? But where's your third? And also, Joe Montana existed. Now you have Brady and Breeze, who could make an argument, I guess, but not really. You're leaving out too many greats in football. You're leaving out too many quarterbacks that belong in that conversation to try to narrow that in. You can't do it. You cannot find another example that, in my estimation, throughout sports history, gives you the 3 greatest of all time throwing haymakers back and forth. And that's what Djokovic and Federer did for 6 hours yesterday, including the moments when Federer had Djokovic on the ropes. 2 match points that he came back from. And this is one of my favorite things about tennis. It is the ultimate test of your mental resilience. At any given moment, at any given time, that game, by the statistics and the numbers, will convince you you're done, quit, it's over. It'll also convince you you've won, man. All you got to do is close them out here at 40-15 on your serve. It's yours. And you, if you are strong enough in your mind, if you don't give in to the odds, the statistics, if you don't give in to the doubts, that game continuously rewards mental toughness. It's my favorite thing about tennis. And Djokovic didn't give in. He came back. He came back from those 2 match points down and won his 16th Grand Slam. Novak Djokovic is ready not just to be in the conversation of the 3 greatest of all time trading blows, but he's ready to be the GOAT. That's what he said after Wimbledon.
I'll keep on striving to be the best player in the world and to fight for Grand Slam trophies. At this stage of my career, that's what inspires me, that's what motivates me, and obviously historic number one as well is not so far away, so it just depends on how healthy I am, how committed I am, how good I play in the next couple of years, and we hope for the best.
He's 32 years old, Federer's 37. He has career and longevity ahead of him. He has an opportunity to take it all. But for now, what we're watching is unprecedented. What we're watching is the 3 greatest of all time trade haymakers back and forth. Give me another example of that happening in sports history. 888-729-3776. And that's Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Everything for less, only at Walmart. It's Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. today. And across the landscape of the NFL, there are several players now who want to get paid. But will they get paid? From Melvin Gordon to Jadeveon Clowney to Dak Prescott. The running back position, the defensive end position, and the quarterback position, teams must ask themselves, can we go all in on this guy? Or does it compromise our roster? Let's talk to somebody who knows. Let's talk to ESPN NFL front office insider Louis Riddick, who joins me now. Louis, let's start with some of the transactions in the league. Melvin Gordon first. He's told the Chargers he wants a new deal or he'll hold out. I don't see he has a ton of leverage here, Louis. It feels like running backs everywhere aren't getting the deals they want. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Look, the most amount of leverage really that running backs have is the day that they're drafted, provided that they're drafted high in their first-round picks. Maybe they ought to start holding out then and really trying to, blow up this whole slotting system, this whole slotting mechanism that happens in the first round, because after that, they're like a new car. As soon as you drive them off the lot, their value just starts to depreciate immediately because teams are very much so, and rightfully so, concerned about their future performance based on the number of hits that they take. And with Melvin, considering the fact that he's missed time with lower leg injuries, knees specifically, and the fact that, history says that it's a very risky proposition to sign running backs to big-time second contracts. Just look at what happened here with, a guy like Devontae Freeman, what happened with Todd Gurley last year. And if you can get close to, I'm not saying the same, but close to equal production from replacement players like a C.J. Anderson, like a James Conner, if you can get close to the production that you would get from your frontline players for a fraction of the cost, then why would you go ahead and break the bank and extend for a player like Melvin Gordon, although he is a fantastic player, is someone who by signing him to a long-term extension would send the right message to the rest of the locker room that you are going to take care of guys who you drafted and developed and who are your own. But that's the rub. That's the dilemma that really the Chargers are in. Looking out into the future, is this smart for us business-wise? It may be good for us immediately on the football field as far as its impact this year, but is it smart for us business-wise, given what the future usually holds for running backs who have had some of the history that a guy like Melvin Gordon has, and are at greater risk the more carries that they have? It's a tough thing.
I think you brought up short term. That's a good place to focus on where more Melvin Gordon has leverage. The Chargers' window is now. Phillip Rivers' window is now. They have an excellent team to put on the field. If they're going to win a Super Bowl, they're going to do it in the short term, and you would think Melvin Gordon would be a big part of that. Talking to ESPN NFL front office insider Louis Riddick here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. I want to follow up on, you said a running back like Melvin Gordon. What does that mean? How high do you think he is? How elite, how special is Melvin Gordon? Are we talking about one of the top running backs in the league here?
Yeah, for me, I judge running backs based on, can they gain positive yardage? Can they continually eliminate negative plays when teams are stacking the box with 8 men at the line of scrimmage, sometimes even 9 men at the line of scrimmage, and daring you to run? Can you still get positive yardage when it's not there really to get in an ideal situation? And Melvin's one of the very best. He's one of the very best because of his lower body power, his vision, toughness on contact, competitiveness. He has it all in that regard, and that's where I think that's what vaults him into the upper echelon of running backs. He is a good receiver out of the backfield. He is not Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell out of the backfield. He's not Alvin Kamara out of the backfield, but he is quality out of the backfield. And if he was featured as such in the same way Alvin Kamara is featured, then he would be, his numbers would be even better. But he's in that category. He's in that class right now as we sit here right now. And I know, you brought up the argument about, or rather the point that their window is now with Phillip Rivers getting a little bit older. But look, if you're Chargers management too, Will, you're looking back at last year, and although obviously every game has its own specific context, they won every game that Melvin didn't start and play in last year. They were 4-0. So when you have those kind of things working against your leverage as the player, it just doesn't bode well in terms of you getting that not record-breaking, but that upper echelon contract, which in the case of running backs, we're looking at $13, $14 million a year. I just don't see it happening. Now, at $5.6 million that he's going to make on his fifth-year tender, I mean, he's grossly underpaid right now, present day, as it sits. But I just don't see it getting up in those numbers. And it'll be interesting to see where he's willing to come down to, and actually just how high the Chargers are willing to come up.
Hey, Louis, you and I agree that there's going to be, or there seems to be the indications that there's going to be some kind of market correction on running backs. The whole analysis is not so much, hey, is Melvin Gordon great? It's, can I get some percentage of his production at a much lower price? We both agree that's the roster management, right? But at the same time, Louis, teams like the Rams and the Falcons, they're not agreeing with us. They're giving Devonta Freeman and Todd Gurley money. Now the Steelers did choose to go the James Conner route over Le'Veon Bell. What I'm wondering is, do you think this correction is coming? In other words, will Gordon get paid? Will Zeke get paid? Will we see these running backs soon start getting teams walking away from them the way the Steelers did to Le'Veon Bell?
Yeah, I absolutely think it's going to be that way, especially the more you have situations where James Conner excels, where a guy like C.J. Anderson comes and excels in the latter part of the season for the Rams. When you have those kinds of things happen, teams are going to sit back and go, look, okay, let's just look at this objectively. Let's try to remove emotion out of it, and the fact that we feel loyal to the player, which is a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. That's a good thing. You should be loyal. You should, in some respects, take care of your own. But when you look at this objectively and you realize that the number one job of a contract negotiator is to minimize risk to the club when you're signing a guy to a big-time deal going forward. That has to be something that is weighing on their mind right now, whether or not it's worth paying Todd Gurley the type of money that he got paid. We don't know about Le'Veon yet. We don't know. Devontae Freeman, you saw what happened. Jerick McKinnon goes to the 49ers in free agency, gets hurt. Now, I understand it's a freak thing. Injuries are a part of the game, but still, that position carries with it a certain set of prejudices in the mind, or a certain set of, just worries in the mind of contract negotiators that are valid. And I do think as time goes on, the more success that the young running backs on rookie contracts have, and the more that continues to be the norm, the exception is going to be the Le'Veon Bell. The exception is going to be the Todd Gurleys. And right now, I bet if you ask the Rams, would they do this deal again if they had a chance to do it all over again? I'd be interesting to hear what the answer really is. If you could just go out and have a beer with one of the guys out there and say, hey, look, would you really do that deal again? Despite the fact he's fantastic. When he's on and he's healthy, there's nobody better. But would you do that again given what you could get at a much cheaper price and how you could then reallocate those cap dollars to other areas of your football team? Would you really invest that kind of money in a running back? And I think that's gaining steam, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
ESPN NFL front office insider Louis Riddick here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. Lou, I want to ask you about two other contract situations really quickly. Jadeveon Clowney with the Houston Texans. This is a position, defensive end, outside linebacker, that the league does value as opposed to running back that we were just talking about. But Jadeveon Clowney does not have a long-term deal worked out with the Houston Texans. He is under a franchise tag that's going to pay him about $15.9 million. Is Clowney a guy a team should go in on with a long-term deal?
Yeah, you want to lock him up. You want to have him be a part of your franchise because of the premium position that he plays and the level at which he has played that position over the past 3 years. He's been a Pro Bowler the past 3 years. He's one of the best run defenders in the NFL. He's one of the most powerful pass rushers in the NFL. Here's the question with Jadeveon. Is he good enough? Has his play been good enough to justify paying him in the Khalil Mack, Aaron Donald, Frank Clark, DeMarcus Lawrence range, which for all four of those guys, we're talking $20 million plus per year on average, and upwards of $40 million guaranteed at signing before you do anything else. You sign your name to the paper, you get $40 million guaranteed in your bank account at some point in time. Is he in that range? No. Does he think he's in that range? I'm sure he's looking at those contracts and going, that's where I belong. If the Texans thought he was in that range, this would have been done. This would already be taken care of. So obviously there's other things, despite what, other than what he has done on the football field, that is causing them to pause a little bit and slow down on this negotiation. And if you believe even more so some of the chatter that's coming out about the fact that Bill O'Brien, the head coach, and Brian Gaines, the general manager who was fired, didn't see eye to eye on this one as far as just what his true value was to the football team, then it's not a surprise that we're sitting here right now on deadline day not expecting a deal. And that's interesting. That's interesting to me because he is a good player. He is not the kind of player you want to start playing on franchise tags year to year to year. I think he's better than that. He deserves more than that. But it's going to be interesting, absent a GM down there in Houston, just how quickly this deal is able to get done in the future, if it's able to get done in the future. Because if it's done today, then that's it.
What was the chatter? Which one was in on Clowney? Gaines or O'Brien?
That Gaines wanted to, and O'Brien did not.
O'Brien not in on Clowney.
That's the word that's out there, yeah.
Front office insider. We'll Go ahead. What?
No. I was just going to say we'll see what happens there, but all indications are you're not going to see a deal here before the end of today, and it'll be franchise tag or nothing. And he hasn't signed anything yet at this point in time, so that looks like a situation that's it's way down the road as far as when it's going to be resolved.
The last one I wanted to ask you about, Louis, is Dak Prescott. The Cowboys do not have a deal in place for Dak Prescott, and there seems to be, at least in the media among talking heads, a growing opinion that it's reaching numbers that are balk worthy? In other words, is Dak Prescott worth $32 million a year? Is he worth $30 million a year? Does he belong in that class that guys like Rodgers and Roethlisberger are in right now? You know how I feel. I think he's a franchise leader. I think he's a quarterback that can win a Super Bowl, and you don't let that kind of quarterback walk away. But is he approaching scary numbers for you, Louis?
Sure, he absolutely is, and I've said that before when this whole conversation really started about them trying to reach long-term deals with some of their premier players, whether it be him or Amari and Ezekiel. So yeah, it is scary. It's not that he is not someone who you, without a doubt, want as your franchise quarterback for the foreseeable future. That's not the question. It's just about the price. It's just about what is the average per year, what is the guaranteed money, what are we really comfortable with, also relative to what else we need to get done with the rest of this roster. Is it worth having to struggle at other positions because we paid him what Aaron Rodgers is getting paid or what Carson Wentz is getting paid or what Matt Ryan is getting paid? Can he make up the difference? Like, those teams obviously feel as though those guys can make up the difference. And I don't see him in that category. And if the Dallas Cowboys saw him in that category, this deal would be done. So, there obviously is a little bit of a gap, a little bit of a divide that needs to be bridged still at this point. And it'll be interesting to see where they come in. There's no question he's looking at Carson Wentz's deal, and he's going, I need to get paid like that. Because I can justify objectively looking at statistical numbers that I should be in that category. And it's not just an objective exercise as far as negotiating contracts. It's really not. And right now, look, if Dallas was so sure this would be done already, considering the fact that he is the priority of the big three down there. So it's another situation that'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
All right, ESPN NFL front office insider Louis Riddick here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. Thanks, Lou.
You got it, man. Thanks.
Synthetics, taking synthetic motor oil performance to a whole new level. Make the switch to Pennzoil Synthetics today. So you heard Louis Riddick, and there are others. There are so many out here starting to say, don't pay Dak, that's scary. That's dangerous for the Cowboys. Nonsense. So somebody needs to offer the rebuttal, and I will. You pay Dak, and you pay him now. It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Will Cain in for Stephen A. Hiring, you don't want to waste time through dozens of irrelevant... And we had another blockbuster. There can be no rest for the weary. The NBA offseason just keeps coming. Last night, ESPN NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski dropped the bomb that Russell Westbrook had been traded from the Oklahoma City Thunder to the Houston Rockets for Chris Paul, 2 first-round picks, and 2 pick swaps. 2 contracts that were almost seen as immovable were moved for each other. Russell Westbrook is 1 year into a 5-year, $200 million deal, the last of which pays him $47 million. And Chris Paul is basically operating under the same contract, just 1 year further along. So the Thunder get a year's worth of salary cap relief and 2 more picks to their growing arsenal of first-round draft picks. If you want to know what the future looks like, at least in terms of the NBA draft, if you want to know who owns the NBA draft, it's the Oklahoma City Thunder and the New Orleans Pelicans. Might as well just have a 2-man draft with those teams and those general managers, David Griffin and Sam Presti, figuring out who goes where from now into eternity. But the real questions, the real analysis lies in Houston. How does this work? How can it work? Will it work? No. Russell Westbrook and James Harden together. I know everybody wants to get excited. I do. That's what we do, right? That's what we do after a trade. It's easy to see optimism. It's easy to play on paper. You know what it's easy to do? It's easy to play fantasy basketball or NBA Jam and pretend like this is an individual sport. I mean, folks act like this is Federer and Nadal on the same doubles team just because they're great at singles. By the way, they're playing right now at Wimbledon in the Wimbledon semifinals, and Federer's up 1-0 on Rafa Nadal. But basketball's not an individual sport. It's a team sport. It's not simply about talent accumulation. And in the case of Russell Westbrook and James Harden, you've accumulated talent that is almost identical to each other.
This kind of matches you work for, you live for.
A marathon match.
4 hours and 55 minutes, the longest final in Wimbledon history.
You need to be constantly playing well throughout 5 hours if you want to win the match like this.
It was like they're both great chess players thinking ahead, but doing it in a split second each and every point.
I think this was, if not the most exciting and thrilling finals I was ever part of, then definitely top 2 or 3 in my career.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
There's a growing drumbeat across the media landscape. The Dallas Cowboys should not pay Dak Prescott. That if you give Dak Prescott the kind of money he seems to be expecting, if you put him in the $30 million a year class, you will compromise the rest of your team. Well, I have a response to those arguments, and we also have perhaps a new breaking report that suggests the Cowboys might be in a pickle as far as paying some of their biggest stars. That's coming up in just a moment here on the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. You normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, ESPN News, SiriusXM Channel 80. But let me revisit this. I talked to you at the top of the show about whether we've ever seen anything like this in the history of sports. Whether we've ever seen 3 heavyweights trading haymakers, going back and forth, trading claims to be the greatest of all time. Have we ever seen 3 individuals with a real argument that they are the GOAT, all playing together against each other, competing against each other at the same time? That's what you have in men's tennis right now with Roger Federer, Rafa Nadal, and Novak Djokovic. Djokovic beat Federer yesterday in the finals at Wimbledon, running his Grand Slam count to 16. He trails Nadal at 18 and Federer at 20, but he's younger and he's coming for both of them. So have we ever seen anything like this in sports? Let me go to the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line where I have Steven in Dallas. What's up, Steven? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
What's up, Will? Love your show, man.
Thank you.
Hey, so I've got the answer. You mentioned the golf duos. You mentioned Nelson and Snead. You left out Ben Hogan, and those 3 guys.
Well, I said Hogan. I left out Nelson this year. I said Ben Hogan, Sam Snead. You're right. I left off Byron Nelson.
I mean, those guys still have records that will never be broken, and Snead still holds the all-time record for PGA Tour wins.
Yeah, so here's the deal. We have to do this. I guess the only fair way to do that, Stephen, thanks for the call, is to say at that time, though, right? Because you can't have a greatest of all time argument in golf now that doesn't include Nicklaus or Wood. So at the time they're playing, are they trading claims to the greatest of all time? And you go back to that time in golf, and you might have that. I'm fascinated. Although it's not trading claims for the greatest of all time, as in just pure boxer, for their weight class, Hearns, Hagler, Leonard, and Duran in the 1980s, that right there, I mean, you can't turn away from that. That's 4 guys, all of which have a claim, or in the top 50 at least, of ESPN's all-time boxing rankings. That right there, to me, is pretty close to what we get, but it's still not the same. These 3, like, whatever comes after Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer, it's probably Pete Sampras. He's just clearly not in this conversation. And the other part about it is, while Federer has claimed he's probably the GOAT of tennis, by the time this thing is done, I'm not sure he's going to be. So it's completely up for grabs at the same time. Let's go to Cole in Georgia. What's up, Cole? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Hey, Will. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. What's up?
I was just calling to say, first of all, I think you're right about Dak. It's not what he dictates. It's what the market dictates. And the market dictates you got to pay him.
Yeah, if you don't pay him, what else are you going to run out there?
Yeah.
Cooper Rush.
But as far as the top 3 of all time, I think Manning, Brady, and Favre dueling out in the 2000s was a pretty good combo.
Yeah, but Cole, okay, but here's the thing about that. today, if you ask me who's the greatest quarterback of all time, my rankings would come down to two guys at the top of the list. It would be Brady, and he's number one, by the way. It's not now he has won the debate. But it was a debate between Brady and Joe Montana. So even in the 2000s, when you were having the Brady, Manning, Favre trio, you couldn't have left Montana out of that debate. That's like, you know, it's Djokovic, Federer, Nadal, but we always have to remember Pete Sampras won 20. But he didn't. He won 14. So he's not in the debate, but Montana, it belongs in the debate. Thanks for the call, Cole. That's the problem with going with those three quarterbacks. Let's do one more. Because I contend we don't have an example of this in sports history, in any sport. And boxing is the one I keep trying to mine, although golf might be the best. Because we've had, now Stephen from Dallas said, yeah, Ben Hogan, Sam Snead, Byron Nelson. There's three in golf. Also, a decade or so, 2 decades later, you've got Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, Gary Player. There's 2 times you had 3 that could have claimed they were duking it out for greatest of all time. And I keep looking for boxing. Ali, Frazier, and Foreman, but Foreman was never really in the greatest of all time debate. He is in ESPN's top 50 boxers of all time, and Ali was just so clearly putting himself as the greatest of all time. But one more, Mike from Scranton. Mike, you're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
How you doing? Well, how about this? You grew up in the 80s, right? You watched Bird, you watched Magic, and you watched Jordan. At the time, they were the 3 greatest players in that sport. There was no question. Now, injury, illness, cut 2 of their short, but Jordan definitely is the greatest of all time.
But you know what's, I like it, Mike. I like it. But here's the thing. The only problem with that is we think of Bird and Magic's prime when they were duking it out in the mid to late 80s, right? And then Jordan arrives not just as a scoring champion, but as a champion in this debate in the early 90s. I don't really think of him as, I think of him as almost the next generation after Magic and Bird, even though I know they were on the court at the same time, Mike.
I understand that, but you got to look at it like this. Everybody knew that he was going to be the best. Like in the first 4 years, you could tell that he was going to be the greatest of all time. There was no question about it. And I got another sport for you.
All right.
It's racing. What about Gordon, Earnhardt, and Johnson?
Jimmy Johnson?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you, Mike, and I appreciate the call. You just about exhausted my level of NASCAR knowledge when you forced me to come up with the first name for Johnson, Jimmy Johnson. Although I think, by the way, Jimmy is probably considered, is Jimmy the greatest of all time now in NASCAR? I got into NASCAR in the late 90s for a good hot second when they opened Texas Motor Speedway. I went out there and I cheered on Bobby Labonte, and then that lasted about 2 or 3 years and I was out. So I'm going to be honest with you, Mike. I don't have a ton of NASCAR knowledge to fall back on here on, did you ever have a triumvirate duking it out for greatest of all time? I don't mind Bird, Magic, and Jordan as a nominee, but it doesn't reach what we're seeing in tennis right now. Nothing does, in my estimation. 888-729-3776. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. on the Stephen A. Smith Show. So, as I said, there's a drumbeat going on as Dak Prescott has not yet reached a contract extension with the Dallas Cowboys. And there's an anticipation that he's not going to give the Dallas Cowboys a hometown discount, a Tom Brady discount to build around him. That more and more analysts are suggesting don't put Dak Prescott in the $30 million a year club. Right now, you got 4 quarterbacks on an annualized basis who make $30 million a year. Those quarterbacks are Russell Wilson, Ben Roethlisberger, Aaron Rodgers, and Carson Wentz. And there is a sense that if the Cowboys do this, they will compromise the rest of their roster and ask the quarterback to carry the team in a way Dak Prescott has not proven capable of doing. Here's what Max Kellerman had to say on First Take.
Eventually, he may be a truly great quarterback, but that time is not yet. And if you're going to tell me I got to pay him $36 million a year, I ain't doing it. I like him better than Goff. Goff has more talent, but I'd rather have Dak as my quarterback. He has more stuff. Carson Wentz is another story. I'm going to put Carson Wentz aside. I think he's better than both those guys. But, injuries notwithstanding. But Dak I like a lot. I think eventually he'll be elite. But if you overpay him now, Key, you won't put a good enough team around him to win.
That was Max Kellerman earlier today on First Take, and earlier today on the Stephen A. Smith Show here with Will Cain. NFL front office insider Louis Riddick essentially agreed with that analysis from Max Kellerman. I disagree. I think Dak will be elite. I think Dak is on the rise. I think Dak is the exact kind of player that you pay. But we have a new news item here that might have poked up here in the past hour that suggests the Cowboys shouldn't just be worried about paying Dak Prescott. One of their other stars might need to be paid, not later, but right now. The Cowboys have some budgeting to figure out. Can they afford to pay both Dak and Zeke? I will tell you the answer to that coming up in just a moment. But first, Nature Valley sweet and salty bars are the indulgent break you deserve in your day. Have you tried the dark chocolate, peanut, and almond flavor? Now that's a sit on the dock and take a moment kind of bar. Nature Valley sweet and salty bars. All right, I'm going to tell you why Max Kellerman and, with all due respect to Louis Riddick, are both wrong. And why the Cowboys need to pay Dak Prescott. That's coming up on the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio. Will Cain in for Stephen A. Here's where I have Westbrook and Harden as top duos in the NBA. This presumes health, and this presumes everybody was playing today. Number one, I believe LeBron James and Anthony Davis are the top duo in the NBA. I believe they fit together basketball-wise. I think youth is on their side. In terms of Anthony Davis being 26, and I just think you have two of the top 7 players in the NBA in Anthony Davis and LeBron James. At number 2, Steph and Clay. I believe in what's been proven. It's the core of not just a championship team, but the core of a dynasty. These two guards together win. At number 3, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Although they haven't been together on the floor yet, these two-way wings are going to be a defensive force. And Kawhi is capable of taking over and answering the questions we still have to see whether or not Paul George can answer. At number 4, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Got to see how Kevin Durant comes back from that injury. I presumed health, but I cannot presume he comes back at 100%. I'll presume, as the statistics show, he comes back something like 10% less of who he was before. And Kyrie Irving is still an enigma. How will he fit in with all those young guys in Brooklyn? How will he fit in with Kevin Durant? Just because they're buddies now doesn't mean they're going to be buddies after playing together for 3 or 4 more months. And that's why those kind of questions, I don't have Westbrook and Harden in my top 5. At number 5, I have Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. Young, already accomplished, Western Conference semifinals, one MVP candidate among the pair, and Murray. Number 7, the Portland Trailblazers duo of Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show, coming to you live from the Seaport District at Pier 17, being brought to you by Chase. It's Will Cain in for Stephen A. Smith today. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on ESPN News. There's been some suggestion that the Cowboys should wait to pay Dak Prescott, that they shouldn't follow him into the land of $30 million a year, that he's not that kind of quarterback, that you can't compromise the rest of your roster for a player who can't carry you along. That's what I'm hearing more and more from various analysts across the spectrum, and I think they're wrong. But there are some suggestions out there that the Cowboys might have trouble paying not just Dak Prescott, but Ezekiel Elliott as well. I'll give you the latest on that in just a moment here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. But first, Joey from Long Beach. What's up, Joey? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
What's up, Will? How you doing?
I'm good, man.
I just want to touch on the Dak Prescott subject. I believe they should wait before they pay him. At least let him play out this next year before they offer him a big contract.
Yeah, but why? Well, why? Well, I think he'll be a free agent, man. I mean, you could go anywhere. I mean, you could franchise tag him and do that stuff. But why? What do you need to see from Dak that you haven't already seen?
Wanting to leave the Cowboys, I think he would wait. To be honest.
But what are you waiting on? What are you worried about? What haven't you seen that you need to see?
Well, for one, he's been in the league 3 years now and hasn't thrown for over 4,000 yards. I mean, I'd just like to see more. And then you got Zeke, who needs to get paid too.
All right, Joey. First of all, that's an example to me of how fantasy football has ruined fans' analysis. Dak Prescott's been in the league for 3 years and won the NFC East 2 of those 3 years. He has more playoff victories than the guy that just got paid. He's got more division titles than the guy that just got paid. He's got better completion percentage. He's got better quarterback rating, better QBR than the guy that just got paid. He's got everything better than Carson Wentz, except for yards and touchdowns. And we fall in love with those two categories. Why? Because they're what win fantasy football games. I'm interested in winning NFL football games. And I'm willing to pay a leader who can do that. I 100% believe that Dak Prescott is that kind of leader. However, he did bring up, you got to pay Ezekiel Elliott as well. This right now is what Mike Florio has up at Pro Football Talk. Ezekiel Elliott has privately said that he's planning a training camp holdout. We've heard from Melvin Gordon that he wants an extension, or he's not going to show up to training camp for the Los Angeles Chargers. Several times over the last couple of months, when I've had him both on the Will Cain Show and in conversations when I've been filling in for Stephen A. Smith here on this show, ESPN NFL insider Jeff Darlington has told me, watch Zeke Elliott. He may not show up. Watch Zeke Elliott. He may want to get paid now. Now, Melvin Gordon is entering the 5th-year option of his contract, while Zeke still has 2 years left on his contract. As far as Zeke is concerned individually, it makes smart business sense. Clearly, the Cowboys need him. He's at the top of his game. He has less tread on his tire than he will have, or more tread on his tires than he will have a year or two from now. And he's obviously in the category of best running backs in the game, positioning himself to get paid like the best running backs in the game. But this puts the Cowboys into a predicament because they have Dak, they have Amari Cooper, they have Ezekiel Elliott, they just paid DeMarcus Lawrence, they have Byron Jones, they have a ton of players that need to get paid. But I'm here to tell you, when they start that list, when they start passing out money, the first guy they need to pay is Dak Prescott. Max Kellerman is wrong. Louis Riddick is wrong. You pay Dak. I'll tell you why next.
If you believe in breaking the traditional...
The Stephen A. Smith Show starts right now.
I don't know if you realize this, but there's an absolute revolution going on in sports right now. You name the sport. There's a revolution going on, and it's stemming from the same revelation, the same idea, the same thing that coaches across the sports landscape have figured out. Whether it's soccer or basketball or football, coaches over and over are figuring out a different way to win, a better way to win. And I spent my last weekend watching exactly the extent to which we are revolutionizing sports as we know it. It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio, on the ESPN app, SiriusXM Channel 80, and on ESPN News. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern on all those same channels. And you can, of course, join the conversation, 888-729-3776. The Westbrook and Harden pairing, this dynamic duo, continues to feed debate. exactly where does this duo rank in current NBA hierarchy? And how is it ever going to work? How do two ball-dominant guards fit in Houston? And better yet, as far as I'm concerned, how does it fit in with the revolution going on in sports, with the revolution going on in basketball? I'm going to explain to you exactly what I mean by that in just a moment here on ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance, making it easy to bundle your home and car insurance. But first, the Dallas Cowboys have a problem on their hands. The Dallas Cowboys need to figure out whether or not they're going to pay Dak Prescott his demands. And at the same time, while they're negotiating with Dak Prescott, there are rumblings that Ezekiel Elliott is making his way to the table. For several weeks, ESPN NFL front office insider Jeff Darlington has told me, watch Zeke. See what's going to happen with Zeke. Don't be surprised by a training camp holdout from Ezekiel Elliott. And now, Pro Football Talk has an article up right now that sources close to Ezekiel Elliott in private conversations have suggested that he may, like Melvin Gordon, running back of the Los Angeles Chargers, he may not show up for training camp. That Ezekiel Elliott may try to get paid this year. 2 years out from being a free agent, Ezekiel Elliott will look to get paid now by the Dallas Cowboys. I have a couple of thoughts on this. First of all, as we spoke to ESPN front office insider Louis Riddick 1 hour ago, I believe that there is a market correction coming to the running back position in the NFL. And Melvin Gordon may very well be the flashpoint of this market correction. For years now, if you were a great running back, if you had this kind of leverage, these kind of stats, this kind of position in the NFL's running back hierarchy, you got paid. Look what happened with Todd Gurley. $15 million a year, $45 million guaranteed. Look what happened with Devonta Freeman in Atlanta. And although the Pittsburgh Steelers walked away from Le'Veon Bell, look what happened with Le'Veon Bell and the New York Jets. $13, $14 million a year. But I saw a fascinating stat by ESPN's Dan Graziano. He said 6 of the highest paid running backs, 6 of the 10 highest paid running backs in the NFL missed time last year because of injury. Among those, some of the running backs I just mentioned. Devonta Freeman signed a new deal, missed time with injury. Jerick McKinnon signed a deal with the San Francisco 49ers, missed time because of an injury. And of course, Todd Gurley signed a contract as the highest paid running back in the NFL and missed time because of injury. And at the same time, while that's happening, teams are learning they can find not replacement, but some approximation of the value at much cheaper price. Nobody makes the argument that James Conner is Le'Veon Bell, but can he give you 70% of Le'Veon Bell at a third of the cost? Can CJ Anderson give you 70% of Todd Gurley at a tenth of the cost? This is the kind of roster management and budgeting decisions that teams have to make. And they are seeing examples of that exact market correction. Can I get some percentage of the value of my star for much cheaper than the cost? But you have not yet seen, outside of the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team absolutely walk away from their star. And Melvin Gordon, running back for the Los Angeles Chargers, might just be that flashpoint. In his corner negotiations, he has it the Los Angeles Chargers window is now. Phillip Rivers' age, the quality of that roster, the opportunity in the AFC, the window for the Chargers is now, and it is short. It is in the next 2 to 3 years, and it will most likely need Melvin Gordon. But in the Chargers corner, when it comes to those negotiations, what are we talking about? Are we talking about a top 5 running back in the league? I don't think so. What are we talking about? Do we have somebody else that can come in and give me some approximation of Melvin Gordon for much cheaper than the current going rate for top running backs in the league? We have Austin Eckler, and he's looked pretty good. Melvin Gordon may very well be the flashpoint. He may very well be the market correction. Or will it be Ezekiel Elliott, who is now suggested, it's perhaps possible, Ezekiel Elliott will be looking to get paid right now. I think there are 3 to 4 running backs that serve as the exception to the rule. 3 to 4 running backs who you go ahead and pay. 3 to 4 running backs who are irreplaceable. In my mind, those are, right now, Ezekiel Elliott, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, and I say this one with some hesitation, Alvin Kamara. I need to see Alvin Kamara put a full season together as the bell cow, but those 3 to 4 running backs are special. I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to have to pay Ezekiel Elliott, and I think they intend to. The problem is they're going to have to do it after Dak Prescott. Hey, if you missed any of the show today, including my opening segment here on the Stephen A. Smith Show about have we ever seen 3 players, 3 competitors trading haymakers about who is the best of all time, the way we're seeing Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal do so in tennis, go check it out on demand in the Stephen A. Smith podcast brought to you by the Capital One Venture Card. Earn unlimited double miles on every purchase every day. What's in your wallet? As I've said, there's a growing drumbeat within media circles that the Dallas Cowboys should not pay Dak Prescott. And why? Because they have to manage their roster. This exact conundrum. You got to pay Zeke. You got to pay Amari Cooper. You got to pay Byron Jones. If you pay Dak Prescott $30+ million a year, you can't put what's needed around him. And there are those who suggest he's not the kind of quarterback that can play with an average roster around him. I think those voices are wrong, but let me hear from them first. Like Hunter in Texas, who's on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. What's up, Hunter?
What's up, Will? I think that the Cowboys Dak $30 million a year because he averages 240 yards a game, and yes, he's won his division twice, but one year he didn't get close to winning it, and that was the year Zeke wasn't there. That's because Zeke and the defense carry the team, and it's in the weakest conference in the NFL, or one of the weakest conferences for sure, and that's inarguable.
Hunter, I beg to differ. I think it's extremely arguable. And I think it's extremely winnable for me to argue it. First of all, Dak Prescott is 32-16, Hunter. That's his record over 3 years. The year that you said he didn't come close to winning the division, the Dallas Cowboys in their down year, in the year when they were without Ezekiel Elliott for 6 games, went 9-7. He's never had a losing record. Hell, he's never had a 500 record. And that's taking into account the years that you said showed you some reason to doubt him. Second, the NFC East is the worst division in the NFL, Hunter argues. Thanks for the call, by the way, Hunter. No, stay here, Hunter. I'm sorry, but in the past 3 years, the same time frame we're talking about, Hunter, how many Super Bowl championships have come out of the NFC East? You still there, Hunter?
2. Yeah, 2.
No, the answer is 1.
You're right.
But thanks. I mean, I think you're helping my argument more than needed. In a 3-year window where Dak has been playing, Hunter, the Eagles came out of the NFC East and won it all. How is this the weakest division in football when there are 6 divisions across the league, and in the last 3 years, this division has produced one of the Super Bowl champions? How does that work, Hunter?
He has a top 5 running back and a top 5.
No, you're changing the argument. How is this the weakest division?
Top 5 running back and a top 5 defense, and he can't get him to the NFC Championship game. If he was an elite quarterback, he'd be able to do that.
Hunter,
he doesn't deserve $80 million a year than that.
Man, that was a nice pivot, man. You moved away from your losing point real quick. Yeah, I think you made 2 of them. Thanks for the call, Hunter. You made 2 losing points, quickly tried to move to another. I'll make my argument for Dak Prescott in just a moment, but let's see if you can get some kind of tag team buddy like Scott in Idaho. Scott, Hunter needs help. Tag him in and come in here.
I just got to think that Dak Prescott is the weakness on their team. I just don't think he can throw the ball down the field with any sort of accuracy. I mean, having a solid running game with Zeke in the backfield and a solid, maybe the best offensive line in the game when they're all healthy. I think if you brought Carson Wentz over, I think they're a 16-0 team every year.
Where does this stuff come from? I'm serious. Don't go anywhere, Scott. Stay right here. Don't take him down or cat. Don't hang up on
you. I've been trying to talk to you for months.
You have? Well, good. Well, I'm glad you're here with me because I don't understand where this stuff. Scott, I can choose my path here. I can be kind of a jerk or I can be friendly. And it's hard for me sometimes because, man, where does this... I'm serious now. Let's talk. Where does this stuff come from? Like, where does this perception that Carson Wentz is all world and Dak Prescott is average come from? Because it doesn't come from anything that reflects reality. Let's just talk about reality for a moment on some of the points that you made. Dak Prescott, I believe, over the last half season, had the highest accuracy percentage of any quarterback in the NFL on deep throws. I need somebody to double check me on that because I don't want to ever be giving you false information. So Cerruti is running the show. Cat's riding shotgun today. Somebody get on that. That's a little bit of a hard stat to dig up, but that's banging around in between my ears somewhere here. Dak Prescott, who has a reputation as dink and dunk, check down artist, is anything but. But see, that's my point, Scott. Like, how do we come up with these things? Because I'm fairly sure when we come back in a second, somebody tells me he's going to be one of the most accurate quarterbacks on deep throws in the NFL. On top of that, you also made the argument about his supporting cast. I'm sorry, but isn't the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line consistently rated as one of the top offensive lines in the NFL, ahead of the Cowboys most of the time? Isn't that the case?
Yeah, I don't know about that. Maybe last year when they were banged up, but the prior 2 years, the Cowboys, they were unstoppable on the offensive line. The year they were 13-3, they just ran over people. Dak didn't have to throw the ball at all.
Dude.
They were just running over people.
I think we develop these ideas in our head and then they don't stand up to the stats, the scrutiny, and we fall back in the end. We got a guy that works on this show named Pat. He's a big Eagles fan. He's like, I can give him all these stats. Dak is 32-16. He's made to the playoffs every year he's been in the NFL. He's won the division twice. He has a better head-to-head record against Carson Wentz than Carson Wentz. He has a higher completion percentage. He's got 67 touchdowns to 25 interceptions. Carson Wentz has more touchdowns, but then Dak runs for 18 touchdowns. He beats him in almost every category, both statistically and in actually winning football games. And yet we have this perception that, Dak isn't that great. Carson would go 16-0. I swear, I don't understand where this stuff comes from at all. Look, one more. Corey in Texas. Come on, Corey. You guys can triple team me. What's up, Corey?
Okay, so I've been listening, so I'm going to talk about a few things that you've been saying before about Dak Prescott. I do not think Dak should be getting paid that $30 million. One, because Dak may be the third or fourth best player on the team, and so Dak is the leader as far as mentally, but Dak is not the best player on the Cowboys, and he's not carrying the Cowboys, period. And then you talk about him and Carson Wentz. Obviously he has a better record than Carson Wentz, but when you're talking about Carson Wentz and Dak Prescott, the biggest thing you talk about with Dak is a team stat. When you start talking about Carson, you name everything, and Carson has had an MVP season. I believe he got robbed of the MVP by Tom Brady.
Corey, you want to set aside wins and losses, which I find absurd, and you want to focus on stats, right? That's what you want to focus on to make your argument for Carson over Dak. Here's the thing about that. I win, Dak wins on every stat except for two. That is passing yardage and touchdowns. Dak wins on completion percentage, QBR, quarterback rating, every game-winning drives, fourth quarter comebacks, every single one, except for yards and touchdowns. So what is it that you hang your hat on in the end for Carson Wentz? Is it fantasy football productivity?
You can talk about stats. I'm not going to argue stats because I know they're very close. But when we talk about more than stats, Carson Wentz it's not even close, has played and has had an MVP season. You can't say the same about Dak.
Fine. That's fine. That's right.
In the 4 years, you cannot say that Dak has had close to that year Carson Wentz had.
Well, he had
the Super Bowl. He was out in the playoffs.
He had a rookie year that rivals. Hold on, he had a record-setting rookie year that rivaled some of the greatest of all time. We're talking about names like Tom Brady here when we start talking about how great he was his rookie season.
You can say his MVP season and his rookie season, but it still wasn't better than Carson Wentz MVP caliber season. And we all know if he doesn't get hurt and miss those 3 games, he's going to win MVP.
Okay, I got you. Okay, Corey. So here's the thing. This is how this conversation goes. And I make the argument for wins and losses. You say, hey, don't do team stats. You respond with supporting cast, and you ignore that the Eagles have had a great supporting cast, including a Super Bowl winning supporting cast around Carson Wentz. In fact, a supporting cast that was so great that it won the Super Bowl without Carson Wentz. So I find that absurd. And then you move to stats, and I point out that you really only have 2 stats, and you say, okay, let's ignore stats as well. And it always comes back to one thing, which you hang your hat on in the Wentz versus Dak debate. You hang your hat on the eye test, and that 2/3 of a season that did put Carson Wentz into an MVP race. And all I'm telling you is, you're in the end, after we have the debate and we set aside all the things you want to set aside, you're putting all of it, by the way, thanks for the call, Corey, on that 2/3 of a season. And Dak has 3 seasons of evidence. 2/3 of a season that admittedly was better than any moment Dak has had as a take your sample size, that's better. But Dak has 3 seasons, which adds up to much more than Carson Wentz. All right, let's move forward. The Stephen A. Smith Show is brought to you by Barbasol. After 100 years of making shaving cream, Barbasol is finally making razors. Well, that was a no-brainer. Try the Barbasol Ultra 6 Plus today. Save now at Barbasol.com. The argument about whether or not Russell Westbrook and James Harden are going to work together, to me, what it ignores is the absolute revolution going on across the sports landscape. It continues to focus on the idea that individuals and individual talent is the way you win championships. And that flies in the face of everything we've seen in almost every team sport over the past decade. Here was Ryan Hollins once again on ESPN's First Take today, laying out why this is going to be so great.
You got Russell Westbrook and James Harden on the same team. And guess what's back for D'Antoni? Guess what's back? The 7-second offense. They're going to push the pace. They're going to run. They're no longer going to play slow. James Harden will not have to manage his minutes because he has a guy where he's tired. Your turn, Russ. Russ is tired. Your turn, James. These two are going to be absolutely dynamic. And I get it. I still like the Lakers. I still like the Clippers. But guess what? You don't want to see these boys in the first or second round. It's going to be a problem.
It's a problem if you believe the way to championships is simply to have the players on the floor that can win their individual matchups. But that's not what's going on in sports today. Brian said a lot of ridiculous things in that, like it's going to be the return of the 7 seconds or less Mike D'Antoni Phoenix Suns. That was pass, move, go, driven by Steve Nash. And what we're looking at here is 2 players that play isolation ball and slow down the movement of the ball and the players off the ball. What more, he offers up that James Harden is going to play off the ball, which I don't even know if that's a good idea, much less I believe it's going to happen. There's so much required optimism and setting aside of egos to believe that James Harden and Russell Westbrook are going to work together, but more importantly, it defies the revolution going on in sports. Here's what I'm talking about, all right? Anybody that's listened to the Will Cain Show on ESPN Radio probably has picked this up at some point, but my kids are super into soccer. Now, what that means living in New York City and what that means through the wintertime is they end up playing a sport called futsal. I don't know how many of you guys that listen out there have ever heard of futsal, but it's essentially small-sided soccer. It's 5-on-5. 4 in the field and a goalie, a little bit like basketball, and it's played on a hard court with a little bit heavier ball, and it's a very passing-oriented game. And we went this past weekend to Atlantic City, where it was the national championships for futsal. And the team my kids are part of went to it. And, man, you know what was just so very obvious at this is that the teams that won, it wasn't about, no matter what people might want to tell themselves, it wasn't about talent deficits. It wasn't about who had the best individual skill players. It was 100% about the teams that were organized, ran a system, and all 4 boys in the field at the same time knew if he does X, I do Y. All 4 players moving like a very sophisticated ecosystem in responsive and coordinated and beautifully choreographed ways that confuse defenses and gut you wide open. And by the way, it had nothing to do with who had the ball in their hands. It was guys moving without the ball that gutted teams open. If you think about what's happened over the past couple of years, this has been what's happened in sports. It has been a product of system and organization over talent. Every single sport. I want you to think about this, okay? I grew up in Texas. Football is everything in Texas. When I was a kid and I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, the teams that won the state championship in football in Texas were the teams that were the biggest, strongest, fastest. Without a doubt. It was who had the best talent on the field. And then something weird started happening. All of these schools across Texas who were suburban, honestly, a lot of times, small kids, not blessed with huge size, has changed over time. And clearly at talent deficit started winning it all. At the time in the 90s, it was teams like Austin Westlake, started winning it all. You're like, that's not a football powerhouse. Football powerhouse is Odessa Permian and Dallas Carter. This is who wins it all. Austin Westlake was winning it all. What happened was they started implementing systems starting in middle school, offenses that they taught everybody in that school system how to run. By the time those boys arrived to high school, they've been running the same offense through high school football and 7-on-7 in the spring and summer until they knew it like it was instinct, like the back of their hand. And they gutted everybody across the state, started racking up championships. And then here's what's fascinating. All these little quarterbacks who were, as I said before, perhaps not as talented as the ones you were running out before with size and ability, but with the ability to execute a system, short quarterbacks, in fact, started going off to D1 colleges. And those colleges adopted the same systems. And you saw the emergence of quarterbacks named Drew Brees, then Baker Mayfield, then Kyler Murray. Guys that if you were focused on individual talent, wouldn't even been put in the position to play quarterback if you were focused on the system. And the system won and everybody adapted. My point is, this is not just in football. And by the way, now, Big 12, from Texas high school football to Big 12 offenses to the NFL. What is the NFL? It's Austin, Westlake, Lake Travis, Texas high school football offenses. It's Baker Mayfield in Cleveland, Pat Mahomes in Kansas City, Kyler Murray in Arizona. It's what it is, the systems. And it's happened in basketball in the same way. Pass, move. It's the Steph Curry revolution. It's happened in happened in soccer. And now you're going to tell me because you put Russell Westbrook and James Harden on the same team, the talent is going to be something they can overcome anything? No. What system fits these two guys? It defies the revolution going on in sports. I've got more on this. I want to tell you more examples. I want to hear from you as well. 888-729-3776. You need seats to a game? Download the Vivid Seats app and enter promo code CHAMPS at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Don't buy just any seat. Get a Vivid seat. All right. I want to hear from you. Plus, Ben Simmons has a $170 million max deal with the Philadelphia 76ers. Is he worth it? It's coming up on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. And we had another blockbuster. There can be no rest for the weary. The NBA offseason just keeps coming. Last night, ESPN NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski dropped the bomb that Russell Westbrook had been traded from the Oklahoma City Thunder to the Houston Rockets for Chris Paul, 2 first-round picks, and 2 pick swaps. 2 contracts that were almost seen as immovable were moved for each other. Russell Westbrook is 1 year into a 5-year, $200 million deal, the last of which pays him $47 million. And Chris Paul is basically operating under the same contract, just 1 year further along. So the Thunder get a year's worth of salary cap relief and 2 more picks to their growing arsenal of first-round draft picks. If you want to know what the future looks like, at least in terms of the NBA draft, if you want to know who owns the NBA draft, it's the Oklahoma City Thunder and the New Orleans Pelicans. Might as well just have a 2-man draft with those teams and those general managers, David Griffin and Sam Presti, figuring out who goes where from now into eternity. But the real questions, the real analysis lies in Houston. How does this work? How can it work? Will it work? No. Russell Westbrook and James Harden together. I know everybody wants to get excited. I do. That's what we do, right? That's what we do after a trade. It's easy to see optimism. It's easy to play on paper. You know what it's easy to do? It's easy to play fantasy basketball or NBA Jam and pretend like this is an individual sport. I mean, folks act like this is Federer and Nadal on the same doubles team just because they're great at singles. By the way, they're playing right now at Wimbledon in the Wimbledon semifinals, and Federer's up 1-0 on Rafa Nadal. But basketball's not an individual sport. It's a team sport. It's not simply about talent accumulation. And in the case of Russell Westbrook and James Harden, you've accumulated talent that is almost identical to each other.
I never really, I want to go to the Lakers. It's definitely an opportunity for me. I think, this organization is a great organization.
To sit here next to him and think he's going to be on our team and he's going to be a pillar in this franchise for many years is just something we're incredibly proud of.
This was you sort of taking control of your life.
By me, being able to take control of my career, any decision that I make, I can sleep at night.
There is no more complete basketball player in the game.
I like our roster. I like every player that we have. It's going to be fun for sure.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio, ESPN app, SiriusXM Channel 80, and on ESPN News. I can give you all the statistical reasons that I don't believe Russell Westbrook and James Harden will work together on the floor for the Houston Rockets. I can tell you about usage rates and how these two players are some of the highest in the NBA. At their peaks, over 40% usage rate for James Harden and Russell Westbrook. How does that work when you put the two of them together? We could talk about Russell Westbrook's spot-up shooting, his stroke from three, and that he shot 29%. And how's that going to work on a team? And you can tell me about James Harden playing off the ball, and I'm going to be doubtful about both this egos and basketball philosophy. But the truth is, one of the main reasons I'm skeptical about Russell Westbrook and James Harden together is because I went to a futsal tournament this weekend for my son. Futsal is hard surface, hard court soccer, small-sided 5-on-5, and I watched teams gut each other. The very best in the country, this was the national championships, because they worked as cohesive units with off-ball movement and players that knew what to do in response to each other. They weren't individuals, they were a team. It wasn't about any one player's skill. It was about the way those teams work together. And I'm here to tell you, this is the secret to winning any team sport in 2019. We've seen this revolution. I just laid out what went on in high school football in Texas starting in the mid-2000s, or really the 1990s, where suburban schools started winning state championship after state championship by running the same system from middle school through high school. It was a system that produced the likes of Drew Brees, and those systems were adopted by Big 12 colleges like Oklahoma, and then produced quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray. And it's a system that has been adopted in the NFL that is producing careers like Patrick Mahomes and Kyler Murray in Arizona. Can you master a system? Can you master off-ball movement? Can you get every player on the same page? This trumps talent. It's happened in soccer. Greatest clubs in the world like Barcelona run the same system from their academies when they're 12. So by the time they reach La Liga, they've all been running it for a decade. They know what they're doing. And in basketball, we've seen it happen with the Golden State Warriors and Steph Curry. The Steph Curry revolution is his obviously his shooting, but his off-ball movement. It's the players without the ball working together that are the ones defining winning at every level in every team sport. And so I wonder, when you take two incredibly talented and amazing individuals like James Harden and Russell Westbrook, how is that going to work? How's that going to win anything? It's not about just getting the best talent. It's not about having the best player on the floor. It's about 5, 11, however many players you have on a field or a court, all working together at the same time. The Stephen A. Smith Show is brought to you by mycomputercareer.edu, training for a better life. That's the revolution going on in sports, and that's why I'm doubtful of Russell Westbrook and James Harden together. Rob in Miami. What's up, Rob? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Hey, how's it going, Will? So this is my opinion. To me, the Rockets are easily the clear-cut favorites to come out of the West, and I'm going to tell you why. If D'Antoni were to sit there and start Tyson Chandler and Capella at the same time, we're looking at a modern-day Twin Towers on defense. You got the most dynamic backcourt in basketball with Harden and Westbrook. Remember, Westbrook led the league in assists last year, okay? On top of that, you plug in P.J. Tucker, who's going to play that dog mentality defense. I just don't see how you're going to tell me Harden and Westbrook can't work together. They've done it before.
Because they led the league in usage rate, isolation plays, drives to the basket, each as individuals. You can't do that when they are together. I know what you're doing, and I hear everybody saying it. Russell Westbrook led the league in assists. Russell Westbrook's assists are after pounding the ball into the floor for 10, 15 seconds, driving to the basket and kicking out, sometimes in desperation, by the way, to somebody outside. How's that going to work with James Harden, whose game is also predicated on him having the ball at his disposal, in his hands, for long periods in the shot clock until he isolates the perfect shot that he wants? The problem is they're both incredibly amazing individual players, Rob. I don't know how that meshes together.
What if D'Antoni brings back that quick offense where they have to put up a shot in less than 7 to 10 seconds back like in the Phoenix days, and you run pick and roll with Tyson Chandler and Capella all day on them?
Here's a question. Why didn't he do that with Chris Paul and James Harden?
Because I think Chris Paul's athleticism isn't where it was.
No.
Like, the difference between Chris Paul right now and Russell Westbrook, to me, is Chris Paul's not
Yeah,
even
but that's not why he did. Yes, correct, Rob. And by the way, Chris Paul has injury concerns. That's not why he didn't run that offense in Houston. He ran it because the best, and by the way, most efficient offense in Houston was give the ball to James and surround him by shooters. Thanks for the call, Rob. And for that matter, Chris Paul, much better shooter than Russell Westbrook. TJ in Michigan. What's up, TJ? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Hi, Will. Thanks for letting me on the show. I just wanted to, you brought up an interesting point about Russell Westbrook driving to the hole and passing out in desperation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now that if you put Russell Westbrook in that same scenario, he now has P.J. Tucker. He now has a James Harden. And while I don't see immediate success happening from this team, I have to believe that it is an upgrade at the point guard position, just because now you have somebody who's just physically capable to be able to play the one or two more than Chris Paul is.
But James Harden runs the point, man. James Harden ran the point for Houston. James Harden, I did a top 5 list of top 5 point guards in the NBA some weeks ago on the Will Cain Show. And everyone's like, where's James Harden? I'm like, well, is he really pointing? Like, yes, he's the point guard. He's the point guard in Houston. That's my point, TJ. Harden is the point guard. So what are you going to do with Russell Westbrook?
You can play him at the 2. He can guard any 2 guard as well as James Harden.
Which one you're going to play it to?
Russell Westbrook plays the 2.
He shoots 29% from 3. He's one of the worst in the league at spot-up shooting. So James runs the point. He does his isolation. He drives and kicks to Russell Westbrook, and the defense doesn't have to guard Russell. He doesn't shoot well, man. Can't shoot. He can't drive into a lane that's already clogged that James Harden just dished out of.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, look. I believe D'Antoni is a good coach. I really do. But I don't know that you can figure this out. I don't know. It's a riddle. And I'm not trying to just be the naysayer and try to be negative. The bottom line is they're both, I don't doubt this at all. They're both incredibly talented. You just increased your talent level, without a doubt. Going from Chris Paul to Russell Westbrook, you increased your talent level. But what I'm trying to say is this, man. And look, I'm a sports fan of every stripe. And I feel... If you're listening right now, tell me you haven't seen this. I'm serious. No matter how big a fan you are of individual talent, have you ever seen selfish play? I'm not talking about the kind that's like, you're a jerk. I'm talking about the kind where you're like, no, I'm going to do it all on my own. I'm going to do it all on my own. And what happens to everybody else on the floor in any sport? You end up with 3 guys going, well, I'm not going to make a run because he's not going to make the pass to me. And not just that, it's not just I'm not going to be rewarded for my run. I better stay back on D because if he's going to do it all himself, there's a decent chance he's going to lose the ball. It breaks everything down. So now you have 2 players who are extremely individually focused. And what I'm telling you that I've seen across the sports landscape is those teams lose. They may have incredibly high individual talent, but they lose to teams. Football, basketball, soccer, hockey. They lose to teams who can play as a team, maybe with less talent, but to play as a team. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Pick from a range of coverage options with the Name Your Price tool to find a price that works for you. Ben Simmons has a new deal in Philadelphia. Would you have given it to Ben Simmons? It's a max deal. And someone wants to tell me how 2 of my arguments, Dak and the Houston Rockets, actually fit together. That's coming up on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Your radio, your computer, your phone.
Here's where I have Westbrook and Harden as top duos in the NBA. This presumes health, and this presumes everybody was playing today. Number one, I believe LeBron James and Anthony Davis are the top duo in the NBA. I believe they fit together basketball-wise. I think youth is on their side in terms of Anthony Davis being 26. And I just think you have two of the top 7 players in the NBA in Anthony Davis and LeBron James. At number 2, Steph and Clay. I believe in what's been proven. It's the core of not just a championship team, but the core of a dynasty. These two guards together win. At number 3, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Although they haven't been together on the floor yet, these two-way wings are going to be a defensive force. And Kawhi is capable of taking over and answering the questions we still have to see whether or not Paul George can answer. At number 4, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Got to see how Kevin Durant comes back from that injury. I presumed health, but I cannot presume he comes back at 100%. I'll presume, as the statistics show, he comes back something like 10% less of who he was before. And Kyrie Irving is still an enigma. How will he fit in with all those young guys in Brooklyn? How will he fit in with Kevin Durant? Just because they're buddies now doesn't mean they're going to be buddies after playing together for 3 or 4 more months. And that's why those kind of questions, I don't have Westbrook and Harden in my top 5. At number 5, I have Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. Young, already accomplished, Western Conference semifinals, one MVP candidate among the pair, and Murray is on his way up. This pairing plays well together. This pairing fits, not just on paper, but on the basketball court. We can't say that about Westbrook and Harden yet. We can also say that Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton at number 6 are ahead of Westbrook and Harden. Giannis is the league MVP. Middleton is an all-star. And I'm also going to place at number 7 the Portland Trailblazers duo of Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio, SiriusXM Channel 80, and on ESPN News. The Philadelphia 76ers and star Ben Simmons have agreed to a 5-year, $170 million maximum extension. Simmons agent Rich Paul confirmed to ESPN's Brian Windhorst. Whatever you think of Ben Simmons, you got to give him this deal. At a minimum, that's a trade asset for the Philadelphia 76ers. I believe in Ben Simmons. I'm not yet sure that Simmons and Embiid is going to take the Sixers project to the ultimate conclusion, the title. But I still want to see Ben Simmons put in the optimal situation to succeed. I want to see him put in a Giannis situation. I want to see him put in a situation where he's surrounded by shooters and he can drive and kick. If you missed the end of the show today, go check it out on demand. The Stephen A. Smith podcast brought to you by Capital One Venture Card. Earn unlimited double miles on every purchase every day. What's in your wallet? Let me hit up the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line first. Will from San Antonio. What's up, Will?
Hey, Will. I just wanted to chime in on you saying that Russell Westbrook does not fit in the Rockets system. I absolutely agree with you. I think the only way that team can succeed is if they somehow run like a 2-style of offense with a transition led by Westbrook and isolation led by Harden. But I also want to tie it back to Dak Prescott, because you said if Westbrook fit into that system, if Dak Prescott fits in the Cowboys system, then they should pay him. I think you're exactly right. I think if a player fits with the system and works, and you should absolutely pay them. But yeah, I think the Rockets are done, and they really don't have a good chance this year.
I totally agree with you, by the way, and Dak Prescott does fit into the Cowboys system, both the intangibles and the tangibles. He is, by all accounts, a great leader, a great locker room presence, a high character guy. That's the kind of guy you want around. That's the kind of guy you want as a leader of your franchise. What more? He fits perfectly. And you could say, well, anybody does. With a great offensive line and a running game, he runs the play action. He can bootleg himself and run the ball. Dak Prescott is the perfect quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys right now. I think we constantly, and I don't care how many times you do it, And I don't care how many times you say, well, they had to. The reason that Russell Westbrook or James Harden played that way is because they had to. How many times as you're sitting there, wherever you are, getting your car serviced, not knowing what you're talking about or whatever, say, oh, the reason he's a selfish ball player is because he has to. I don't care how many times you say it. Say it while you take an L. Say it while you lose to teams that move without the ball. Say it while you understand or prove incapable of understanding why you keep losing to teams that have less talent than you, because talent loses to system. Sage in Illinois. What's up, Sage? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Hey, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. What's up?
Yeah, I was wondering, you talking about Russell Westbrook and James Harden. How far do you think they're going to go in the West? I mean, you're going to need the two superstars, you know what I mean? So how far do you think they're going to go?
I think they're going to have a nice regular season, and through the first, 4 or 5 months of the NBA season, somebody is going to come back at me and go, oh, it's not working out, huh? They're probably going to have nice stats. They might have a nice win total. And when it comes to the playoffs, they're going to lose in the Western Conference semis. I think that's what will happen with the Houston Rockets. The minute it's put under pressure, the minute it's tested, the minute they have to sort out the hard questions of who takes the last shot, who gets the ball, who runs the offense, the minute they really have to sort that stuff out, it'll prove incapable of overcoming teams that run a real offense. Brandon in Arizona. What's up, Brandon? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Quickly, Brandon.
Will, what's going on, man? Hey, I just wanted to call in and tell you, first off, I love that you jump on Stephen A's show and take it over with some Cowboys talk. That's amazing. Back to the Dak Prescott and Zeke contract situation, and I actually think that it's more important that he signs Zeke at this point and not overpay a quarterback that, to me, yes, he fits into the system, but I think he's a product of the system. And I don't think you should overpay for a guy like that.
All right, thanks for the call, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate you making it tight as well. Now, you pay the quarterback over the running back. That's a reflection of positional value. That's a reflection of what we're talking about. The debate that teams have to have over guys like Melvin Gordon and maybe soon Ezekiel Elliott. All right, it's been Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. Smith. It's the Will Cain Show next with